Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of We Should Have Recorded That with Phil and
Adam. Hi.
Hey, Adam, how's it going?
I'm doing really great, Phil. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Doing good as well.
Only good, not great?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I could say great. I'm doing great. You know, it's a
Okay.
nice day.
It's a
Nice day.
You avoided Isaias, right?
We did. Thank God. We were prepared, but yeah, last over the weekend we didn't really have any bad weather, so
All right. Well,
it hit
there
us.
are some places that are getting it, but I'm glad it missed you.
Yeah, we'll keep praying for them. I saw the flooding in some areas, but yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, Phil, I'm so excited to be with you for another episode.
Me too. I'm excited. I'm excited to continue our conversation on church music, and we have another guest with us that we'll get to later. But I guess maybe we should let all of our listeners know that you can share these episodes at Anchor and whatever platform you listen to. You could also comment. We would love to get comments, good and even some bad. If you got something critical to say, you can share that as well. And please,
What is there bad to say, Phil?
I don't know. Maybe they didn't like our joke, or we could tell more jokes. Maybe not. Maybe we don't want to tell more jokes. But
I mean, I guess the only legitimate comment would be that Adam goes off topic a lot.
I mean, that's
Someone
you know,
needs to get him to focus.
No, that I think that's part of what we're doing here. You know, we're just having a conversation, so it just kind of goes. It goes wherever it goes. But
Fair enough.
yes, but please, we're very glad that so many people are engaging with us. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at WSRD.
Sorry, I don't know what this is. What the sixth week that we've had this crazy acronym, and yet every
Yes.
time still that you go WSRT WPA.
I mean, like you,
It's too
like
many letters.
you you were the inspiration, like you said, like when we did with CERT, like
With
but
CERT.
then we found out that there was another podcast with a similar name, so I was like, we need to kind of
We need to add WPA.
individualize. Yeah, so the WPA is us, so you should have recorded that with us. But
All right, I'm
anyway,
sorry. Wait, no, I interrupted you, so our poor audience did not actually hear. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at WSRTWPA,
Yes.
which are the letters that stand for We Should Have Recorded That with Phil Adam.
yes.
Wassert Wapa.
The search WPA. Yes, you can find us there. You can find us on YouTube by the title. Look us up there. You can find the videos that we upload there. We have 2 comments this week, so we're gonna
This
share
is
those comments.
exciting.
Very
Yeah, and
exciting.
they're really sweet comments. So thank you to our listeners for making them. One comes from Joy Schuin here in Rochester, New York, commenting via our Facebook page, and she writes, "A good time." This is in reference to last week's episode on church music with Julie Smith. She writes, "A good time was had by all. Thanks for an enjoyable hour." And thank you, Joy, for listening to the hour with us.
Yes, and we have Micah Russ, who says a very enjoyable episode. Keep giving us Chehi faculty. So we're really enjoying that.
You got it. We can do that.
Yes, I think we can do that.
I love my Chehi faculty, friend, colleagues. Colleagues. You know.
All of the above.
The ones I like, I'll call friends. The ones I don't like, I'll call colleagues.
Okay.
No, I like them all. I like them all.
All right. So I guess we should get into our conversation this week on
Yes.
church music.
This is really exciting because we are continuing to talk about church music this week with another church musician. we have with us the Reverend Dr. Gary Matthews. I think, Gary, you are the most credentialed guest we've had on so far.
Wow. And even some of those credentials are true.
All right. So now, Gary, you also have the distinction of being the first guest who I didn't do my homework and typed out your bio beforehand. So for the sake of our audience, everything I know about you right now is totally off the cuff. Let's see how many things I get right. So you are both a reverend ordained in the, do I remember correctly, American Baptist Church?
It was a conservative Baptist church, yeah.
Okay, yep. Mm-hmm. And then, but you are also a doctorally qualified musician.
In worship studies, yep.
I love it. And you are the minister of music. What is your exact title at Christ Memorial?
Pastor of Worship and Sacred Arts.
That's a good title. At Christ Memorial Church in Holland, Michigan, yes?
Correct.
So all the way from the land of the Dutch, we have the Reverend Dr. Gary Matthews with us. Thanks for joining us, Gary.
Hey, thanks for the invitation. This is a wonderful platform to share church music ideas and church music focus, so thanks for doing it.
Yeah, well, we love these conversations surrounding, Phil and I have talked about all kinds of music and educational topics, and then he and I are very open on this platform about being believers and being passionate about the church. And so church music is just a really natural topic of conversation for our shared interests and hopefully for the interests of our listeners, who I think would probably be interested to know how we first met, Gary. So let's strap in for a quick tale before we begin asking you some questions. So I met Martha in 2013. I think that's right. 2013, I met Martha, who would go on to become Gary's wife. And so then, through Martha, I got to know Gary. And let me tell you, I love Martha Matthews so much that Gary Matthews had better have been a pretty amazing person to win my approval. And I'm pleased to report he passes the bar.
So far, so good.
That's right. You better keep treating her well. So, yes, and so Martha is the bell goddess, is what I have called her, and the two of you actually have the two of you perform together quite a bit, right, Gary?
Yeah, we do. It's been lots of fun because I had a long-standing concert career with my brother, Ron, who's also in music, but now he's the president of Eastern University, and that's kind of like a full-time thing, I think he said. So,
what?
So
crazy.
So Martha and I are doing it together and just loving it.
Yeah, and I think it was last summer that I stopped in and spent a couple of days with the two of you, and I was fortunate enough to be there on a Sunday when the two of you performed together in church at Christ Memorial. And I remember, these two, for the sake of our listeners, these two musicians are so multi-talented, on top of the fact that they have this incredible personal plus musical chemistry. And so Gary's there at the piano and he's singing and playing all of this after he just finished conducting the choir and orchestra, and then Martha is there and she's on the flute, and then my favorite moment of all, she just puts that flute on its stand and walks over to the bell tree and just starts rocking the bell tree. Well, I mean, as much as one can rock at the bell tree. Anyway,
That's correct. Yeah.
it is so much fun to see the two of you perform. So at the end of the episode, we will make sure that our listeners know where they can learn more about you. But for now, let's get into our conversation about church music. Gary, what was your path to becoming, your path in however many words you'd like to share it, of
Sure.
getting where you are now?
When I went to Temple University, it was in Philadelphia, big state school, and I thought I'd be a music educator, which I did for a year. But my passion was really in the church. And so in Philadelphia, where I was raised, I was music director, and I had never heard of a full-time music pastor. That in the North, that didn't happen. And it wasn't until some other people to share with me, oh, you can do it, you can do this. So at the church where I was, I served for about 7 years, five years after college, doing music and other things. And then we were called out to, in 1985, we were called out to the Detroit, Michigan area at Highland Park Baptist Church, which had a great choral program and instruments and orchestras and a lot of wonderful opportunities there. Then 20 years there, which is wonderful. And then the past 15 years, we've been out here in Holland, Michigan at Christ Memorial Church, which is a Reformed church, part of the Reformed Church of America. And again, just wonderful people. The choir has about 175 in the ensemble, and orchestra of about 35. And different. When you're in Detroit, you have access to a lot of wonderful musicians. And in a smaller town, you have a lot of volunteers that love to do what they do. And it's been really a great church to be part of.
Yeah, that is obvious. Gary, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the structure of the music program at Christ Memorial?
Yeah, we have two worship services that are happening at the church. Right now it's a very different type of thing, but in the more traditional liturgical blended music, it's choir led, organ led, as well as musical ensembles. So our orchestra plays the first 2 Sundays of the month. Then usually the third Sunday is our Westminster Bells, which is a handbell ensemble. And then the fourth Sunday is generally a brass ensemble, percussion ensemble, which are some fabulous players. So that's that. And then we have a contemporary worship service that's led by a wonderfully gifted and worship lover. And they have a more band related. And so it's a pretty wide variety, and hopefully people who have the gift or the desire to continue to grow in their gifts are able to serve.
Yeah. And maybe to give context for our audience, how large a church do we need to have in order to have, to experience 175 people in the choir?
Well, it's interesting. They say, I'm going to turn that off so it stops binging. I think they say if you can get 5 to 6% of your congregation to be singing in a choir, you're doing well.
Yeah.
But I really inherited a place where that wasn't the case. It was more like 10 to 15% of the congregation was in the choir. Yeah. And so now, we're at about maybe 15 to 1,700 members
Mm-hmm.
So of the church, and 150 to 170 on roll. Now, who sings on Sunday might be, as every church, usually about 2/3 of that, due to
Yeah.
traveling and all that. But yeah, to have over 10% of your congregation involved. So we've named it about 250 are involved of the 1,700 members are involved in the music program.
Wow. That's an incredible. I mean, that's an incredible number, but that's also an incredible ratio.
Yeah.
What? How do you um, go about the the task of convincing? Maybe convincing isn't the word, but let's just go with it for the moment. Of convincing your congregants to become involved more actively in the worship ministry.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think that it is a deep-seated commitment of the Dutch culture to have education as very important. So I would say that West Michigan and even the church might be 70% Dutch. So part of that culture is music, education. Even the smallest schools have fabulous music programs.
Mm,
And so when you grow up in high school, singing all 4 years, uh, and then you're out of it for a while, singing in a large group is something you miss.
yes.
Um, so I think if you're in a larger church that has something that's you want to be part of, that's not foreign for people. First, you're not convincing them that a choir is something that's important.
Mm,
They already know that because they've experienced it. I think in many parts of the country, you have to do that convincing first. Why should I give 2 hours during the week? Why should I participate on a Sunday morning? And a lot of that is already a given.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I want to ask you a question we asked Julie last week, and that question is how. I mean, you're a very devoted believer in Jesus Christ yourself, and as you even said today, you had no intention of becoming, a full-time church musician, and yet, so what that means is that you were, before becoming a full-time church musician, an active worshiper yourself.
Correct.
What's the difference between being a worshiper and a leader of worship?
Hmm. I think it's an extremely pastoral calling. I love if you were to ask me to give myself a title, it would probably be a pastoral musician.
Mm.
Hmm.
Um, I love that title because it says that I'm a pastor first. I feel called to be a pastor, and music happens to be my tool.
Yes.
And so I don't know if that answers that part of the question, but because of that, um, I'm always looking through that grid. It's interesting when I first started at the former church at Highland Park Baptist, where I was. Joe Stahl, who's the president of Cornerstone University, was the pastor, and I was finding myself really boxed into just music. And I was young, I was 29, and I was trying to figure myself out. And I went into him and said, I don't think this is for me. And he said, Why? And I said, Because I want to be involved with people's lives as a pastor, and I feel as though all I'm doing is conducting. And
Hmm.
and he said, you have to remember that music is your tool. We all have tools. Preaching is a tool. Visiting is a tool. And if you can use your gifts as a tool, that is pastoring. And that really helped me a lot, to recognize that that wasn't my calling. And so, therefore, worship is my passion. I feel as though that the book of Romans for me is key, for understanding worship. The first chapter, if you don't mind me talking about this.
Please. No, this is terrific.
Okay, the first chapter of Romans says that we are either worshipers of the Creator or the creature. And if you take that from a big perspective, that is true. And that was true with Adam and Eve. They were worshiping the Creator, and then all of a sudden they had the gift or the opportunity to give themselves over to something else. Romans 12 talks about that the definition of worship is that I have the opportunity to offer myself to God as a living sacrifice. So worship is offering myself. And so Adam and Eve ended up offering themselves to the fruit and to the creature. And then we have a choice every day who we're going to offer ourselves to. And so having that bigger mindset of what worship is, then what comes down to what happens on a Sunday is that we're celebrating really what gives us the opportunity to go before our God. In the Old Testament, it was the deliverance of God from Egypt. They celebrated all their festivals, all their celebrations was to celebrate their deliverance. And as New Testament believers, that hour that we commune together, we are celebrating our freedom in Jesus Christ. So that becomes the focus of the attention of church music and worship.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea of being pastoral is really good. For those who may not be really church, could you explain what does it mean to be pastoral? Like,
great question. You know, I think a great word is shepherd. Maybe is a little more, and those was raised in a city of Philadelphia, so I don't know sheep at all. But I do know children by having 3 daughters, and you know, a shepherd just cares for his flock. The goal is not numbers. Even in the scriptures, how the shepherd would go after the lost one and leave the 99. And I think, you know, we can love music, and that's an important part, but the shepherding aspect of it, caring for people, being there in time of need, maybe that is developing community, being aware of the need for community. All those things are so important, perhaps to define pastoral.
Yeah. Gary, you mentioned earlier about how you do see yourself as a pastor first, but you are such a multifaceted musician. What are some of your musical outlets? People are your ministry, but what are you doing musically to fulfill that part of yourself?
That's a great question. I think for me, and for the church musician who's in charge, it can't be their stage. Your goal is my goal is Ephesians 4, which says your goal is to facilitate the works of ministry that God has given to each person. So my role is to help facilitate others. So I very, very rarely perform at our church. Now, if there's a need, certainly I'll fill in, but I'll usually serve as backup, and encourage others to be involved and facilitate them. Creatively, having concerts outside of the church on my ministry has been really fulfilling, to create that. Creating worship, for the musician who can every week have the chance to take all the little pieces and develop worship is very fulfilling. I'm doing some arranging, and I'm doing some new things with conducting, and so they're all out opportunities to use my gifts. At the same time, with my brother and even with Martha recently, we might do a concert at the church every couple of years just for people to realize, and even for our own people to realize, oh, they're still developing their gifts.
Yeah.
I still practice everything every day. I think that that's really important to model getting better in your craft, so that the people as well. That's part of facilitating others. That we're going for excellence, all of us, including the director.
Yes, yes. So what do you say? We're going for excellence, which I think God in the Bible commands us to pursue. What do we say to Bob, who just loves to sing in church, but may not be excellent?
Yeah.
Or you can change if you have a Bob in your congregation, and you probably do with 1,700 people, maybe we should change the name.
Well, you'd have to put a van in it because it's Dutch. But, I think, I don't know, are you asking that they come to you and say, I think God is leading me to sing?
Yes.
Okay. Versus, see, when you drop the God word, what are you going to do, right?
That's the problem. God told me that I should sing a solo.
And I usually say, you know what? We have a 6 a.m. service we're starting. And let's start next week with, you can do the call to worship.
Yes. Oh.
Well, what's interesting? Response. I think this is a real interesting time because in COVID, every church is trying to figure this out with singing. Mm-hmm. And we've used this time. We've been doing online things till about 5 weeks ago, and then we were allowed by the state to open up a little bit. And but one of the things we decided to do was reteach worship. So the very first week, everybody had to have masks, and they were sitting all over the place. And I said, the first question people have asked, are we going to sing? And I said, we are going to sing. I said, now, 1 Corinthians 14:15 says, I will sing with the mind, and I will sing with the spirit. And I said, so how do you do that? Paul says, when you sing with the mind. So with the mind, re-look at these words, re-look at these hymns that we're going to sing. They're phenomenal. Don't let them go by your mind. And when you read these for the first time, it'll stimulate your heart. And as a result of that, you might want to whisper the words or sing softly, but the vocal part is the result of the mind and the heart. And Adam, you know that when you conduct. I've watched you conduct choirs. You're not just trying to get them to vocalize, you're trying to have them think about what they're doing, and it goes in their heart, and then what comes out is a result. Yeah. So I think if people can get away from thinking that singing is just a vocal activity, because that also handles the other type of Bob, who says, I'm not going to sing in church because I sound awful. It's not how you sound as much. I mean, our goal in a choir is not to have, 150 soloists. Our goal is to take all these various voices and bring them down into one voice. Yes. And that's something that we can do and we can work on.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Would you tell us a little bit more about what the opportunities? Let's think on the positive. What opportunities has COVID-19 presented as a church for you and as a church musician?
Yeah, that's also an amazing question, because in the traditional quote convergent service that I lead, basically my toolbox is emptied.
Mm.
because there's
It's
no
ensemble.
choir. The way we did orchestra, the way we did handbells, the way we did those things, we can't social distance.
Right.
So it's been a matter of trying to say, how do we refill the toolbox? And so just today, our handbell director went and realized, oh, the handbells could stand in the choir loft and socially distance and do their thing from there. We're going to put together a trumpet choir in a few weeks because we have about 8 good, strong trumpeters, and they're going to stand in the choir loft, socially distanced. And then, as far as a choir, how do you bring it down to 20? Well, we might just divide them up and have them sign in, and do those types of things. So it's just a matter of refilling your toolbox. I think for churches, we've had I had a Zoom meeting today with some of our staff, and there are some amazing articles out there right now that have, one I just read, 12 good things that have happened for the church as a result of COVID. And we know, like, some of the churches have had the opportunity to push forward what they wanted to do, and that was to get online. Okay,
Mm.
now they're doing it. And then some of the uh, statements that are being said is that we will probably never see church again like we have experienced in the past, which means that many people are predicting maybe only 2/3 of people will ever come back in the church again because they're finding the online experience so so wonderful for them. Well,
Mm.
that has a lot to say to leaders of churches. How are we going to do this? Buildings are maybe not as important. People, we have to invest. All the things we say are right, but this is forcing us to, I think, move into areas that we've talked about. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
That makes total sense. How do you feel about? Uh, do you feel there's any danger of losing something, not something superfluous, but something essential, as we transition into this next era of doing church, being the church?
Well, we've always talked in worship about being a participant versus then being a
Mm-hmm.
spectator.
Yes.
And so I get concerned. My major concern is, how do you move spectators to being deeply participants?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think liturgy is key for that. When I've attended an Episcopal church or a much more liturgical church, I remember the first time I did that, and when I was younger, I came home and I said, I am worn out because I was up and down and I was speaking, and like 50 of the 60 minutes I was involved,
Yes.
versus many of our churches where we'll go and we'll sit and watch other people do it. And I think one of the dangers of, we of watching it online is that I am so used to flipping channels, and so, and because I'm a consumer,
Yes.
Right.
um, and so I think that that's a fear. And also, obviously, the community aspect. The church is more than just watching something, but it's investing in people's lives. So if we can focus in on what the values are of the local congregation and say, how can we um, attend to those folks and to deal with those values, I think that's critical.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
Because you guys all know that being in the choir, the church choir, a volunteer choir, or a volunteer handbell ensemble, or a volunteer orchestra, it's much more than just playing their instrument or using their voice. It's a family,
yeah.
and families are so important. You can't
Yes.
just do that by sitting around watching a screen.
Yes.
Yeah. I think something that we've kind of gone back to each time, and I think you're hinting at it even now, the importance of having, I guess, kind of a the documents, like what is our mission statement, and what is our
Mm.
what grounds us, even in as we think about liturgy, like what how are we being intentional about engaging engaging the congregants. Like, could you like expound more on that, those values that you talked about, and and being intentional with the documents and those type of things.
That's good. Yeah, for me, um, I'd had to develop a mission statement for our worship ministry and music ministry. And it's basically that worship for us is a spiritual journey that leads towards
Mm.
transformation of the person, but it's a spiritual journey. And so, if I think of it as a spiritual journey, liturgy um, is is basically, as we all know, is thought of as the work of the people. And there are some churches that say, "Oh, we're not liturgical." Well, that's false.
Mm.
Every church
Yes.
As a
is
liturgy.
liturgical. They have they have their own liturgy, whether it's plug and play hymns or or a half hour of contemporary music followed
Mm-hmm.
by a preacher for a half hour. That's a liturgy.
Right.
And so the
Yeah.
choice is not whether we're liturgical or not. The choice is what type of liturgy are
Mm.
is most suitable for this present congregation, and do they know why they're doing what they're doing? I think one of the things that we need to do, and part of my training with Robert Weber was capturing the past and
Yeah.
giving it life for the present and for the future. And
Mm.
so that's why most of us, we go back and we read some of the scholars and some of our fathers and all the wonderful things that they've shared about worship. And then our goal is to make it fresh for today.
Mm.
Hmm. Yes. So, hmm. Okay, here's how I'm going to frame the question. But before I even ask the question, let me just say I am I'm not actually taking this position. I'm playing devil's advocate for just a moment. What? So your congregation, as you said, you have one service with one particular style, and another service with another particular style. I'm not personally. I'm not saying there's anything good, bad, and different about that. I'm just asking for the people who would say, well, then it's like you have two different congregations and they never see one another, or to the people who would say, well, shouldn't shouldn't senior saints learn I'm learn to worship in 21st century ways, and shouldn't young Christians learn to worship in ancient ways? How do we? How? What would be your response to people who might ask those questions?
Well, I think they're good questions. I think um, one thing that we do is that we do cross a little bit, but um, to force someone to enter into something that generally they don't understand,
Hmm.
I think is, again, it goes back to what I said from 1 Corinthians 14:15, because Paul also said, and I will pray with the mind and the spirit. So I think that there has to be an understanding of what the purpose is. And you have to go through a lot of judgment calls for individuals and that goes back to being pastoral.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just going to throw something in there for shock value, but you're going to maybe throw something in there for text value.
Yeah.
And this is maybe new. This is a new hymn that's been written, or this is a new song that's been written that will be used. And there are certain things that even in the other way, the contemporary way, we're finding out more and more that 20-year-olds who have been raised in purely contemporary worship services, it's just old to them. The black box church, they're saying, is just, it's just lights and action and cameras. I mean, that's going to have a place, but there's a yearning for something deeper. There's a yearning for silence. There's a yearning for peace. There's a desire for justice. There's a desire for these things, and if they want to get a good entertaining event, they'll just go to this podcast, or they'll just go, or
Yeah,
they'll just
we're
go
all
to
about the light show here.
That's right.
Yes.
No, but if I want to see a concert, I'm going to go to a concert.
Yeah.
I don't want you to sparkle me with Jesus and lights and action. I want something of substance.
Yes.
And I think that's growing more and more for those who have been only brought up in one diet of worship.
Yes. What's the role, Gary, that the church musician plays in connecting connecting the demographic segments of a congregation, the generational divide, perhaps the ethnic divide? How can church music do that?
Mm. Well, I think, like for example, our orchestra is made up of multi-generational folk. Um, and I think that that's been a fabulous picture for the congregation. And then those who are much more professional are able to help them, mentor the younger. So I think it's a big picture. I think you have to understand what your context is and really understand that, and then move slowly and pastorally in a growing way. So, for example, I think there have been times that I've seen things forced, and everybody, the words that we hear that people want are genuine, transparent, and authentic. And then sometimes when you go to a place and they force, for example, we're going to sing this song in Spanish. Well, you look around and there's nobody who speaks Spanish anywhere around me. Why are you like this? Like I'm struggling. I'm not learning that. It doesn't make any sense. However, that's not to say we need to stay in our own little worlds. We do need to experience something else. Sometimes that can happen through concerts. Sometimes that can happen through individuals that you bring in who that is their gift. But don't expect the worshiper to jump right into some type of something they've never experienced. It's like saying, this is good vegetables, now eat it and throw it at them,
Yes.
It's like, no, you taste a little bit of it. Like for me, I'm a very widely, like I love gospel and I love all different styles of music. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody around me that I'm leading is in that same mold.
Yeah. It's a lot like teaching, isn't it? Taking the learner, meeting them where they are, and bringing them to hopefully a better place, a place that's more appreciative of a wider variety of expressions.
It's so true, Adam. I think I see that in your conducting. At the end, just the time I've seen you at Chehi, where you have brought together these kids from different places one day in the beginning of the week, and in 5 days they're performing as one unit. Well, where did that come from? Well, first of all, it came from your desire to get them to that place, and you only have 5 days or 4 days sometimes.
Yeah.
And how do I get them to that point? Well, it's knowing where they are and saying this is the direction we're going, and watching people get there. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when it happens. I think one of the things that I really appreciate is that people don't mind change, but they do mind loss. And so if they see if you're removing things, that's harder than if you're adding things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying we're going to sing this style of music and not this,
Right.
then you're like, I don't even know what the purpose of that is. But adding
Mm-hmm.
to your plate is something that's good. And I think even as musicians, if you say, "Oh, I don't play by ear, I only need the notes," well, learn how to play by ear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. Just
Yeah. Oh, I
that's how
love
you
that
grow.
distinction. Yeah, that's such a helpful distinction.
Hmm.
I mean, what do you think that looks like? That adding, maybe for your choir or for your orchestra, how do you add and not take away, like, or give an example of how you've done it?
Well, I think the choice of repertoire. um, I have always found that, um, for example, a church choir generally doesn't like something that's hard. At
At first,
Yes.
However, when you ask them at the end of the year what was their favorite piece,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be that hard piece.
That's right.
mm-hmm.
So if you can be willing to take the sneers and the looks and the "we'll never do this," and work your way through, versus giving them an easy arrangement of a hymn tune which they just love, but after 4 weeks of rehearsing it's like,
They're
are you
tired of
kidding,
it.
we have to sing this again?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's an aspect that I've always seen that I remember with that my previous church when we did the Brahms Requiem, and that was a stretch for them, but it turned out to be their favorite of anything that they ever did.
Yeah.
Um, and here I decided to do four major works while I've been here, and they've become their favorites. And it just
Yeah.
takes a lot of willingness to pursue that, and not beyond what they're able to know. One of the things that we've done in our traditional service, that if we're learning something new, I do the 1, 2, 4 method, which means I'll introduce it on a Sunday by maybe somebody singing it as a solo. The second week, we'll we use, when something's new, we use digitalsongs.com, which
Mm-hmm.
allows the notes and the words to be
Yep.
there. And then skip a Sunday, and then the fourth Sunday come back doing it, and now it's learned,
Mm.
it's part of them. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of their repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. As a congregation, that's part of their repertoire.
Right.
Oh, I love that. Um, Gary, before we move into our final segments, is there anything that you want to tell the world about, issues in church music, or just, something on your heart that you've got this platform now? Go ahead. Give it to us.
Well, if you are a university anywhere in the world and you want to bolster your choral program, hire Adam Potter. I want the world to hear that. Uh,
Well,
he,
I'm gainfully employed already.
yes, I know. I know.
So, all right,
I'll just
if
say,
I if I
I'll just say
lose
this.
my job, then I'll have to ask you to say that again.
Or maybe I'll say, just give him a raise.
Just give
Oh,
it a praise. Yes.
I like that. Well, can I take this opportunity to say, on our platform, our giant platform here,
Right.
if you are a K through 12 school anywhere in the world and you want a great choral music program, hire Phil Woodard.
Yes,
Wow.
I would. Yeah. Thank you.
That's
I
good.
would, yeah.
I wasn't ready for that. But no, I mean, this is like, no, I mean, all of our conversation has been really good, and I've been on the past few days. I guess I would say I've been kind of lamenting, that, that the experience that I had with Pierce Memorial Church, that is I'm not gonna like I wouldn't be able to have that experience with the choir in the same way.
Mhm.
You
Mm.
know, I mean, have you lamented any, Gary, as
Mm.
you kind of gone?
Oh, absolutely. I lament because I see our people lamenting.
Mm,
So I'm empathetic, joining them with their lament. But also, lament is part of life. It's part of
mm,
liturgy, and you
Yes.
can't, and you have to move through the lament, and that's our job. How can we help lead them through the lament?
mm,
Um, by having weekly Zoom meetings or whatever. How I did want to say this, that one of the things for worship pastors, if a church is looking for one, and I've always seen this, and actually it was somebody from Willow Creek who said this.
Mm-hmm.
He said they are trying to look for three C's: character, chemistry, and competency.
mm,
And it always has to be in that order: character,
mm,
the godliness of a performer, of a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where are they arrogant? Are they, those types of things? Secondly, the chemistry. How do they get along with other people? And thirdly, the competency.
Yes.
And I know, how good they do their craft. And you would think, oh no, you're going for the best person. Go for the best performer. Well,
Mm.
when you've had that, I've seen that happen, and the whole thing blows up.
mm.
Yes.
You can't get those three out of order. So that
Yes.
would be one thing I would share. The importance personally, your character and your chemistry with others, and your competency. All three are important, but
Of course.
it's in that order.
Yeah. I would say the same to a school administrator about
Yep.
hiring a teacher. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Gary, before we do move into our final segments, I just want to thank you all, here preliminarily. Thank you. Such good thoughts. And I also just want to say how much I appreciate how scripturally grounded you are. How scripture saturated your philosophy of worship
Mm.
is. It's a great encouragement to me, and I'm sure to our listeners as well.
Well, thank you, Adam. And Phil, I just really appreciate this forum and this opportunity to speak on it. And I think you guys are doing a great job. It's awesome.
Yeah, these are fun
Thanks.
conversations.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
We Phil, have you been enjoying yourself?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I've been enjoying and learning a lot. So I'm really really glad to meet you, Gary.
Yeah,
Mm.
for sure. Gary, at the end of every episode, we do two final segments. One is Current Events Corner, where we talk about something in the news unrelated to our topic for the day. And then the second is What Did We Learn, where we come back around full circle and talk about something from the episode that particularly struck us. So, are you willing to play along?
Hey, I'm willing to jump in.
Excellent. All right. Hey Phil, how about you go first this week? What's your current event?
Okay, two things really quick, and they're tied together because I think they kind of point to the end and beginning of an era. We had the splashdown
Mm-hmm.
of the space mission on Sunday. I kept on Saturday. I'm like I was seeing like we're live streaming the splashdown. I wasn't really sure what that was on Sunday. I saw that, but so like I really appreciate how they kept saying, now Americans are sending, we're now able to send Americans back into space, and
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. And also the funeral service of John Lewis, and he is a fellow Alabamian, and
Mm-hmm.
so to kind of be able to see him celebrated, and to think about the work that he did, kind of being this new era that we're kind of entering. So those two things for me.
Mm.
Mm.
Thanks for sharing, Phil.
Yes.
Gary, what's been in the news that's on your mind?
Well, I'm a kind of a sportsaholic,
Okay.
so that's what I've been lamenting. the lack of sports.
Yes.
So it's been interesting though for me to watch certain sports come back into liveness, even though it's probably too early. Um, but how they're trying to help people relive the reality, even though there's no people watching. You
Right.
know, whether it's baseball piping in
Yes.
fans or
Yes.
basketball putting these different people watching from their
Mm.
Zoom cameras, and it just reminds me people are missing community.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Mm.
So
Yeah, that's so true. Um, my current event, I am choosing this week to just avoid headlines. This there are
Good.
just too many things to bring you down. So my current event this week is to share with all of our listeners what a great company JetBlue is. I um I was on a flight this week, um, and there was something wrong with my boarding pass, so they needed to see my identification to make sure that I was actually Adam Potter, since that was the name in their computer system, and so I needed to take my driver's license out, and then once they let me onto the plane, I don't know what happened, but I must have like dropped my driver's license on between the jet bridge and the plane,
Oh,
and
wow.
I anyway, about 3/4 of the way through the flight, um I was actually buying something on Amazon because of free in-flight Wi-Fi from JetBlue, and I pulled my wallet out to get my credit card information, and my driver's license was gone, and
Wow.
then I like searched my pockets, I searched my bag. It was no place to be found, and I immediately I texted my housemate, and I was like, I'm gonna have to get a new driver's license. Like, oh, went to the New York State DMV website. All right, what forms of ID do I need? All of this. Okay, so I get home from the airport, and I get a call from JetBlue, and they say, Mr. Potter, we found your driver's license. If you come back to the airport, we'd be happy to give it to you at the ticketing counter. And I just can't tell you the relief that flooded over me, especially after in my research on free in-flight Wi-Fi, I saw that the first appointment at the DMV wasn't until September. So,
Wow.
yay, JetBlue.
yes.
So anyone out there, if you have the choice to fly JetBlue, they will
Do it.
return your lost items.
That's great.
Yes. All right. Let's go in reverse order for what did we learn this week. So I guess that means I have to go first. What did I learn this week? You know, I want to just circle back to what you said, Gary, about being an active participant in worship. What a great reminder that is, especially in this COVID-19 era, this era of online church. It is so easy to become a consumer, isn't it? So thank you for the reminder of what our job as worshipers is, and that it's not a passive task. Yeah, thank you. Phil, what did you learn this week?
I mean, there are so many things. I want to say
I know.
two really quick.
Yeah.
The being a pastoral musician, I thought was really good. And cause like first, I think for me, like, I talked about this last episode, like allowing the music to minister to me first, like helps, will allow me to minister to others. And I think that's part of it. Like knowing that, that God is speaking to my heart. But then the second thing you said that I thought was really good, that singing starts with the mind and the heart, that produces the vocalization. That is really good, like you said, because that helps the person who like, is are you singing to God, or are you what is your motivation for singing? So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so true that I the way that music is that mind, spirit, body, voice interconnectedness. It's magical. It's just there's nothing else like it in the world.
Yeah.
It's so interesting with that. It reminds me of how with a choir, if they're if it's lifeless, you can browbeat them. Come on, people, you can do all those things, but all I have seen that works is say, do you know what you're singing? Can you
Yes.
shut your book and tell me what you've just sang? And usually the answer is, I have no idea what I just sang. Now, this time, I want you to read the words. And the
Yes.
sound changes, everything changes. Um, so,
Yes. It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah.
Gary, what did you learn this week? We did most of the learning.
no, I really learned it. First of all, Phil, I had never met you, so I just really appreciate you and your heart, your genuineness, and how God is going to continue to use you. I can just see it. I just see that in your heart and your spirit. And Adam, I so respect you as a person, as a man of God, as a leader of people, as a leader of choirs. You are a stunning choral director. And I think your intentionality to be a godly man has always, even though we haven't been together that much, I just know that you're intentional in wanting to be all that God wants you to be. And that's a blessing to me. And then you are an absolute amazing choral conductor. I went on YouTube about 3 months ago because we were going to be doing "Let Everything That Hath Breath" by Jeffrey Ames,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched your directing of that with Chahi, like 2 years ago or a year ago,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I said to Martha, I can't even believe how good he is. You and again, like I said, having those kids for 4 days and
Yeah.
watching their involvement was just great. So for both of you, it's been an honor to just be part of this triangle of Trinity music.
Yes, I love it. Well, I feel the same way about you, Gary, and we just can't thank you enough for sharing your thoughts, sharing your own heart for worship, and especially for God's people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Phil. Anything else for the good of the order?
Well, we should probably mention that you could contact Gary at his church,
Yes.
Christ
Go ahead,
Memorial,
Phil.
and his email is garym@christmemorial.org, and Gary is spelled Gary at christmemorial.org. So if you want to get in touch,
Yes, and I will just mention, for the time when live concerts can resume, for anyone listening to this episode post-pandemic, you can go to Gary's wife's website, silverandbronze.com, and there's a tab on silverandbronze.com dedicated to Gary and Martha Matthews with some contact information there. And you know what? Real quick before we go, Gary, do you want to plug your Carnegie Hall gig?
Oh, well, if we are singing,
Yes, if we're allowed to sing.
yes,
crossed.
yeah, next June, the end of June, there'll be a resident choir that anybody can be part of, and we'll be performing Rudder's Gloria, John Rudder's Gloria, and then also the hymn arrangement by Mac Wilberg of Love Divine with orchestra, and then choir people who want to come. So it should be a great residency opportunity. And again, you can email me about that, Gary M. at christmemorial.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Gary. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will say Bye for now.
Adios.